Now, the ABC last night on its Media Watch program went pretty lightly on journalist Nick McKenzie over the sensational audio in which he admitted to breaching his own ethics during their war crimes case against Ben Roberts-Smith. Now, the worst that Media Watch host Linton Besser said about McKenzie was that he had a lapse in judgement and perhaps he was over-trusting.
It was a private conversation which McKenzie could not have known was being recorded. But these words would prove a major lapse of judgement from such an experienced player. McKenzie's misguided and over-trusting assurances to a witness.
Yep, a lapse in judgement and over-trusting assurances. Well, how did the ABC not take McKenzie to task for failing to publicly explain what he meant when he said he'd breached his ethics?
No, I shouldn't tell you. I've just breached my ethics in doing that. This is put me in a shit position now. If Dean knew that and Peter knew that, I'd get my ass handed in the platter.
Yep, Media Watch directed questions during his program to me, to Nine's witness, who Nine claims is a victim of domestic violence.
So we contacted Person 17 to ask for access to the full tape. She declined to respond to our queries.
To the West Australian newspaper and to Nine itself. I think it's telling that Media Watch thinks everyone else has questions to answer, except the very person at the centre of the story, the journalist who admits in a secret recording to breaching his own ethics. Now, Besser told us today he did put questions to McKenzie and that Nine responded. But in Nine's response, they simply accused other media of a smear campaign. It's a laughable response to the very revelation of serious recordings that have now sparked a fresh federal court hearing. But it's not really good enough, is it, for Australia's most celebrated journalist to refuse to publicly answer questions about what he means when he said he breached his ethics in a way that would have displeased his lawyers. Of course, he used more colourful language. Now, can you imagine if a News Corp journalist, God forbid, had been caught on such a tape? Media Watch would have had a field day, as would The Guardian, Crikey and Nine. Yet the ABC last night even defended McKenzie over the part of the audio recording where he divulged details of a sensitive and ongoing police investigation.
But McKenzie was embellishing because he himself had already published to the world details of 2 live AFP investigations into Ben Roberts-Smith in the 2 years prior. And while it's true there'd been no reporting that AFP agents had moved into the building, a detail Sharri Markson pointed out in her statement to Media Watch, Roberts-Smith had already been tipped off about the AFP's surveillance and was using burner phones to avoid it, which Markson failed to tell her viewers.
Now, just a reminder, here's what McKenzie did say on that secret recording.
No one knows about the police investigation. It's a sensitive, ongoing police investigation. Phone taps, task force. There's a whole new task force has been stood up in Brisbane. An entire new task force. There's police living in his apartment block under assumed identities as we speak. The guy is.
OK, but according to Media Watch, McKenzie was just embellishing. And somehow this was turned into a criticism of me. Now, to be clear, as Besser acknowledged, McKenzie divulged details of undercover officers living with false or assumed identities in Ben Roberts-Smith's own apartment block. And yes, this could have jeopardized the police operation. Media Watch also claimed last night that obtaining the legal strategy in relation to Person 17 wouldn't have made a jot of difference to the outcome of the war crimes case.
And it's hard to see how those first-person accounts are in any way changed by McKenzie's misguided and over-trusting assurances to a witness he knew to be unreliable and who made not a jot of difference to the final outcome.
Now, in the judgment, the judge said that he did not accept Roberts-Smith's evidence regarding Person 17, although he did not find her evidence sufficiently reliable to accept that her serious allegations were true. What we don't know is whether his rejection of Roberts-Smith's evidence on that issue might have influenced the judge's view of Ben Roberts-Smith's credibility when it came to the war crimes witnesses. You can never know how much this influence would have extended. There's also the question of whether other legal strategy was obtained by Nine and provided by Emma Roberts or her friend. As Ben Roberts-Smith's father, the former Justice of the Supreme Court, Len Roberts, said, there are questions about what legal strategies of Ben's was McKenzie referring to, and how did knowledge of them affect the conduct of the case before Justice Bosanko. Worryingly, that might be impossible to know. The issue is whether or not it resulted in an unfair trial. And he said there were questions too about what privileged information or material Ben's ex-wife Emma and her friend Danielle Scott told McKenzie or gave to him. Further, if McKenzie was prepared to speak to P17 as he did on the recording, did he have similar conversations with other witnesses? If so, who? And what did he say to them? Now, during a legal challenge, as you know, Ben Roberts-Smith's lawyers argued that his email account had been accessed at least 101 times, including by his ex-wife's friend, Danielle Scott. And Emma later admitted that she had allowed her close friend, Danielle, to access her ex-husband's email accounts, but she said only in relation to their marriage breakdown. So there's now been an admission that Ben Roberts-Smith's emails were accessed in relation to person 17 and in relation to the marriage breakdown. If McKenzie admits to obtaining the legal strategy in relation to person 17, it raises questions about whether other legal strategy or emails were also provided. Now, Nine is now trying to separate the domestic violence allegations relating to person 17 from the war crimes ones. But it was Nine that wanted to use unproven domestic violence allegations to further trash Roberts-Smith's reputation. They joined the two accusations, war crimes and domestic violence. But they're now trying to separate them and say that they're unconnected to the case. Now, I have learned that Nick McKenzie has been backgrounding journalists against person 17, his own witness, who he claimed was a victim of domestic violence. He's been telling journalists that she's psychotic. She was his witness. Now, I asked Nine about this today, and in response, Nine sent me the same statement that they've been sending versions of to all media for over a week now. They refuse to answer specific questions or address the new issues that have been raised in recent days. Now, I personally think there's a long way to go in this story from Nine's end. What did Nine know about McKenzie's admissions that he obtained Roberts-Smith's legal strategy? Did he obtain the legal strategy in relation to other areas aside from person 17? Has Nine investigated this at all? How could they come out to defend McKenzie so quickly if they hadn't done a proper investigation into his self-confessed breach of ethics? And if they have, what did the investigation find? When was this investigation, and was the Nine board made aware of it, and when? These are all questions I have been and will continue to pursue. Now, just to be clear, I don't have a side here. I've got no issue with either Ben Roberts-Smith or Nick McKenzie. I'm a journalist, and I'm reporting on a highly concerning tape where a reporter admits to breaching his ethics in pursuit of a war hero who he claimed committed war crimes. And I also think that if you're going to doggedly pursue a Victoria Cross recipient and accuse him of war crimes, you have to play fair. And McKenzie, in his own words on the tape, claims to have accessed Roberts-Smith's confidential legal strategy from his ex-wife and her friend. And that wouldn't seem to be playing fair. We need to know if anything else was accessed and how far this went.